It's legal, has psychoactive effects, and is ending up in the mouths of kids.
We've had children in the hospital in ICUs for a number of days because of the monitoring that they need.
What Wisconsin Poison Control is seeing, and how retailers feel about a recent government crackdown. Plus,
I've had to jump through so many hoops and even go to court for this.
she sold her car, so why is she still getting the parking tickets?
The difference is between vehicle ownership and illegal parking.
What the owner forgot to do, and why Milwaukee Parking Services is making changes after hearing from Contact 6. From the Fox 6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Brian Polson, and I'm joined this week by Contact 6's Jenna Sachs. Hi, Jenna.
Hi.
And of course, as always, by Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hey, Sarah.
Hello.
So we are talking about a couple of stories today, Jenna, and I told you this before, as we were literally walking up to the podcast studio. Your stories intrigue me because sometimes they bring us to topics that I hadn't even thought about, and all of a sudden I want to know a million things, and you always have the answers to these things, which is remarkable. But we're talking today about one that started with letters in the mail from the government, and this is in a story that aired last night. It was a cease and desist letter sent to companies marketing Delta 8 products. First of all, what is Delta 8?
So Delta 8 is something that's become really popular at CBD shops over the last few years. You remember the 2018 Farm Bill that went into effect that allowed farmers to start harvesting industrial hemp, and then we started seeing CBD shops pop up. Delta 8 it comes from CBD, which comes from the hemp plant, and hemp is a variety of cannabis, which is the other variety is marijuana. So Delta 8 has psychoactive effects, but on a much more mild level than marijuana. So some people call it weed light or marijuana light, and retailers.
So you can get high from Delta 8, just not as
you
easily?
can get that feeling of euphoria. You can feel anxiety go away. This is what retailers will say. They say it can also help with pain management. Of course, the FDA won't sign off on that. But you'll see it a lot in CBD shops, boutiques, even in gas stations. You might notice them behind the counter. And it's something that's become a lot more popular in the last few years. Delta 8 is actually kind of hard to extract from the plant, and it's a process that involves solvents and chemicals, and it's pretty unregulated. The FDA doesn't regulate it, but it is in stores, and it's available as an alternative to marijuana in states where Wisconsin, where it's not legal.
So you use the word psychoactive is a little scary. So if it has these effects, why is it legal in Wisconsin? Now, I also know Wisconsin's on that island now that Minnesota just legalized marijuana. Wisconsin does not legalize marijuana, has not.
You could have a very lengthy debate about why it's not legal. I think the reason, if you get into technicalities, has to go back to the 2018 Farm Bill, which specifically said that products could not have more than 0.3% THC. What they meant by that was Delta 9 THC. Delta 8 is different. It comes differently from the plant. It's harvested differently, but the makeup is very similar. It's just not as powerful, and it's mild.
I have to tell you, your stories always make me want to do more research. So I found this. This is not because I'm knowledgeable. I just looked this up, but this is a description of the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9 THC. This is a scientific description, okay? Delta 8 THC has a double bond on the 8th carbon chain,
Right.
while Delta 9 THC has a double bond on the 9th carbon chain.
Well,
I don't know what any of that
so
means.
the chemical makeup is similar, but the effect
They
is a little
sound
different.
so similar, but obviously there are very important differences.
So you can see why these retailers have really latched on to Delta 8, because they'll say it's helping people with anxiety. They'll say it's helping people with pain, but you can buy it in Wisconsin instead of going to maybe Illinois or another state where you might want to buy marijuana for issues like that.
Now,
if
this
they could
this
help.
story wasn't just about the differences between Delta 8 and Delta 9. It's actually about a specific warning that the government sent out. What was that about it, and why is that a concern even for some of it sounds like this is a case where some of these reputable retailers are also, they sort of join the government's concern here, right?
Right. I reached out to a number of retailers asking how they felt about this. But what happened is over the summer, the FDA and the FTC sent out a cease and desist letter to 6 companies across the country that were manufacturing products that were basically lookalikes for snacks and candies that are popular with kids. And if you look at the images, you'll see what the issue is. They look like a bag of Doritos or Sour Patch Kids or Oreos. And there's a disclaimer on them. They might have a different name, but the government was
Stony Patch.
Stoney-O's.
Yeah.
I mean,
the Stony
Yeah.
Patch looked like a bag
It
of
does.
Sour Patch
It
Kids.
absolutely does.
it does. And the government was saying kids are not likely to read the packages. They're going to react to the imagery and the bright colors and the cartoonish characters on the outside. And not only should kids not be consuming Delta 8 because it's more effective on their bodies than it would be an adult knows what their dosage hopefully would be. So adult may have a single gummy bear or half a gummy bear as their typical dose. A kid might just put a whole hand in there and grab 6 or 7. They might eat the whole bag, and that can be really concerning.
Are gummies the most common way that people consume? Like, so I know that one of the bags, wasn't it like a Dorito bag or something? Like, so are they're not actual Doritos in there with it? Or is it just gummies? I sound
No,
so
they
ignorant.
look like they look like chips.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
if
Okay.
there's like a little disclaimer on it that says THC and there's writing on the
Okay.
back, but they would argue kids won't read that or notice it. But I'm told those products like the chips and things aren't as popular, the snacky foods, as much as the edibles, which are like the gummies.
Okay.
The gummies are pretty popular. So is vape, Delta 8 vape, and an oil. Oils are also popular. You like deposit a drop under your tongue. But I'm told in general, the snacky things aren't generally the best sellers. It tends to be the gummies and the vape.
It strikes me when I think of my own son. Now, granted, he's 15 and in high school now, but how quickly he still loves fruit snacks. And he goes through them rapidly. I mean, a couple of packages of fruit snacks are gone like that. And I think for a small child who would come across a bag and think, oh, candy, they're not going to have one gummy. They are going to have the entire package of gummies. And what I thought was interesting in your story is you spoke to a health expert who said that the effects aren't immediate. That's the whole thing about edibles. The effects are delayed. So it's not like you would have one and go, I feel a little funny. Maybe I shouldn't have more. You've consumed the whole thing, and now a small child, that effect could be very dramatic, right?
And it's leading to confusion when they arrive in the emergency room because maybe the parent doesn't know that they ate something or
They just
that
think
it
they're
was
behaving
edible.
strangely.
Right. And they might be anxious. They may be out of sorts and confused. And that's hard to pinpoint what's wrong. And that can lead to some pretty invasive procedures like spinal taps and CT scans, trying to figure out what's going on. And I spoke with Wisconsin Poison Center, which told me there have been kids in the ER and in the ICU, sometimes for days under monitoring because they're so out of sorts that they can't do their daily tasks. And so they're just being monitored to make sure they can get back to their normal selves. But they're saying kids are just so much more sensitive to the effects of this than adults are. Poison Center said they had 150 about consultations last year about Delta 8, and about 50 of those were in kids under the age of 12. So they are seeing this, and their call center staff, we spoke with them, just casually, and they were like, oh yeah, we know about this. We hear about this. It's happening. And it's pretty much been going on since the Farm Bill passed. But they're saying there seems to be an increase in exposures.
And that's just like with anything too with kids. I mean, that's the reason why their dosage of Tylenol and ibuprofen is much smaller than any adult. So what do the retailers that you spoke with, what are they saying about the crackdown on the different packaging that might be confusing for people?
So the retailers in general say they support it. I reached out to a number of retailers. 3 got back to me, and they all said this is a positive thing for the industry. Of course, we want to protect our kids. And they basically said any negative incident that happens is a bad reflection on the industry. We want to keep operating. Let's find ways to do this safe. And they did show me ways that certain products have been packaged to make them less appealing and safer. For example, there's a double seal on some of these packages that makes them harder to open. They may have opaque packaging where you can't see the candy on the inside. And there are childproof lids, and some of these items are in jars rather than bags. Although at the same time, I did see some items in a couple of these shops that I think would still appeal to kids. Like you can still see what looks like candy through the back of a bag, but it doesn't have a character on the outside, a cartoon character that might make a kid grab it. And hopefully a double seal would, keep a kid out before you realize what was going on. But at the same time, keep it up on a shelf. It's like having alcohol at home.
Sure, yeah.
Make sure you're putting it in a safe place. They recommended putting it in a safe. And they told me they do sell bags, like locked up bags that actually filter out the smell if you're concerned about pets too. Saying, that you can lock it up, make sure they can't get in. You could also opt to get an oil instead, saying a kid is probably not going to go, oil.
Yeah.
It's not the most pleasant thing to put in your mouth compared to a candy bear, so I think they have some suggestions, but I think if you leave out a bag of candy, even if the packaging isn't all that appealing, you're risking something there.
Well, it made me wonder, too, if part of the focus of this sort of government effort isn't on the idea that if we were in a state with legal recreational marijuana, many of the edibles people might be laying around would actually have the full-fledged Delta-9 THC. Right. Obviously, that would be even more dangerous in terms of dosage, but I wonder if a lot of parents think, oh, it's just Delta-8, it's not even risky, I don't need to lock this away. Is this a message to parents, too, that you've got kids around, this stuff could still be poisonous at certain dosages?
I'd like to think that these parents already know that. I know some of these shops hand out literature with purchases or first-time buyers, just kind of explaining the products and their effects and giving some advice. But I think it's a good warning to parents that if you're going to have these products in your house, don't leave them out. Make sure they're put away. If your kids are older and can handle that conversation, maybe talk to them about, this is for me, this is what I'm eating it for, what I'm taking it for. It's not for you, and this is why. So they recommend just being more aware of what you have in your home, because this is legal now. I mean, there's no restrictions on Delta-8 right now. That could always change. Regulations in this industry are kind of shifty anyway. So at this point, it's legal.
Now, you heard from some retailers who say they agree with this. Do we know if there are any retailers in Wisconsin who got these letters who maybe were selling some of this concerning packaging?
I will say none of the retailers in Wisconsin got this package. They were sent to companies across the country that were marketing these items. I will say I went on the websites for a number of those companies, and I did notice some of the packaging had already changed. What was in a brightly colored bag was now in a dark, opaque bottle with what looked like a child-proof cap on the top. So it looks like some changes have been made. Not that any of those companies responded to me when I reached out. I did not hear back from any local retailers who said they think it's a bad thing. I got the feeling that the people who are really in this industry, who make it their primary bread and butter, right? I feel like they're more concerned about how the industry appears as maybe compared to a gas station that just has a number of things and they have this random bag of chips at the same time. But they said these things used to be more popular, the look-alike products, maybe a few years ago, and they haven't been as popular in recent years, and wholesalers really haven't been offering them as much either. So it sounds like they weren't particularly popular at the time these letters went out, but they had been around.
Well, time to move on to our next story, and this one involves parking tickets sent in the mail, except the woman who got the tickets didn't actually own the car that earned them, at least not anymore. Jenna, what happened to Nadia?
Yeah, so Nadia reached out to us. Our story aired about 14 months after she bought her car. She had been on the title with her dad, and her dad sold the car to a friend. And one mistake Nadia admits she made at the time of sale was she didn't think to remove the plate. And this is something we've reported on before. Wisconsin DMV recommends always removing the plates if you're doing a private car sale or if you're, salvaging your car, because it can lead to headaches exactly like what Nadia experienced, which is the new owner of the vehicle was getting parking tickets in Milwaukee, and they were under Nadia's name.
And those tickets are going to go to the most recent registered owner of that vehicle, of that license plate, right?
As far as we know, at the time of our story, Nadia was still listed as the owner in certain databases, even though she had taken steps that she needed to take to say a private sale had taken place. Her dad had filled out a seller notification form with the state online. That's one of the most important steps. And after her first parking ticket, she got a cancellation form for the plates. She canceled them, and she got a signed affidavit of sale from both parties. So the first ticket she got was in the fall after selling her car, and that one was ultimately dropped by a judge. But she continued getting them, and it was a frustration for her. The tickets were only $20, $30, but at the same time, it was taking up a lot of time for her.
Well, and when they
she was
keep
worried about
coming, you
late
wonder,
fees.
is this ever going to end, right?
Exactly. You know, I think she got 4 tickets in all. One of them was paid by the owner before she got to it. But she wrote to us because she had been appealing 2 of the tickets, and she had just gotten a denial letter for her appeal. And she thought, you have my documentation. Why am I being denied this appeal when my other ticket was thrown out? And she wasn't given a reason for the denial either. So she was going to court again, and she was frustrated.
That's what I was going to say, like the rising frustration probably with the city, because as you mentioned, as she's filling out all these forms and updating stuff and still getting the tickets, like that's got to be a little bit extra for her too then.
It is. And she felt like this is something she should have been able to resolve with a single phone call. Like say, hey, look, I had a ticket before. It was dropped for this reason. This is kind of the same situation. Can't you just drop it for me? And she wasn't getting the response she wanted.
Now, you talked to the city of Milwaukee and the parking services manager, and something sort of unique happened here that actually caused the city to continue issuing these tickets. What happened?
Well, first of all, and this is where there's definitely shared responsibility in this situation, the new car owner never got a new plate and he never registered the car properly. That's on him, right? Quite a bit of the blame here lies on him for not taking the proper steps. But it also found a number of things about him that were concerning. Well, before we get into that, I guess I'll say the reason her appeal was denied and she hadn't been given the reason was that there was this unusual tow record. So basically, after she had sold the car, the city had a record of her dad picking it up at a city tow lot. And they were saying, why was your dad, who was previously on the title, picking up this car after you sold it? And they said that called into question the affidavit of sale she had.
So and when you said that in the story, my thought is I didn't think about this from the city's perspective, but I could see people setting something like this up, sort of, hey, let's say I sold you the car, we'll write out a thing, and that way we can get out of all of our parking tickets. So they're looking at, is this, did you actually sell this car or not, right?
Right. And at the time, they said, looking back, the person who reviewed her appeal at that time wrote a note saying we should request essentially an updated affidavit of sale. Let's see if she has one. The problem is that when Nadia got her letter of denial, it didn't include any sort of explanation as to why. So the city told us we are making changes because of her situation. There's a third-party vendor that sends out all of our notices to drivers about tickets and denials and so on. And we'll make sure that this kind of thing is communicated in the future so that it doesn't happen again.
So if she knew she was denied because we came across this tow record, we need an updated bill of sale, she would know there's action I need to take. I need to go get an updated bill of sale. But she didn't know that because the ticket didn't say anything about that.
Right. So how can she fix it if she doesn't know how she could fix it? It sounds like it's an easy solution. She just has to get updated paperwork. But the city, after sitting down with us, said we have requested that these 2 tickets be dropped. So they sent something to the municipal court, and those tickets were eventually dropped, which was good. But that's not the only thing they found. I started thinking about this already. But one thing I learned by doing this story is that the city parking division now takes a picture every time they issue a citation. I didn't realize that. And so they had pictures of the vehicle, Nadia's old car, every time they had ticketed it. And one thing they noticed when reviewing this case for us was that someone had put a 2023 sticker on plates that Nadia canceled in 2022. That's not valid. So if the city found that car again with those plates and that sticker, they would have towed it, taken it to a lot, and the new driver would have had to show registration, proper registration to pick it up again.
Is the implication here that was a stolen sticker then, or a misplaced sticker of some sort?
I did leave my card at some houses nearby, including the address for the new owner, but I did not hear back. So we don't know who put the sticker on, what the circumstances are, but it's not valid. It's not a legal plate.
You said earlier that her father sold this car to a friend. It sounds like maybe not a real close friend because they're not in communication about all this, or is that a little awkward?
That is a little awkward. Nadia said they had tried communicating with him about some of this, and I'm hoping they're getting it figured out now. But it definitely seems like it's a situation where there's shared responsibility. And we said that up front in the story because Nadia should have removed the plates. She knows that. The new driver should have registered and titled the car properly. And then the city should have notified her why her appeal was denied. So there's shared responsibility across the board.
Now, the best part about all these stories is that you always give those little nuggets of like, hey, if you have a car and you're like, I'm going to sell it to my friend Brian, there's a checklist, right? So what are some of those things? And I know you talked about a couple of them already, but like, what are some of the things that people should be doing, looking out for, making sure those
Yeah,
I's are
the
dotted.
DMV has a checklist online, and we have it linked in our story on fox6now.com. But there are steps like filling out that seller notification form. You can do so much of this online now. You have to transfer the title, and one step they said is don't just remove the plates, but destroy them. Take a cutter to them and cut them up into pieces, unless you want to transfer it to another vehicle, because it could just cause you trouble if that ends up in someone else's hands, just like Nadia found out.
If you sell me your car, I'm parking anywhere I want. It's just that's
You would.
I know. You would know to do all the right things. So there is consumer takeaway here, obviously, from this.
I think so. I think it's always a good reminder that if you're doing these sales, take the proper steps to protect yourself, and then also recognize maybe your buyer isn't going to be perfect either, and make sure it's clear to them what they should do. I've done stories before where they recommended you meet and make the car sale at the DMV, and then you go in together to make sure the other person is held accountable. And I don't think that's a bad suggestion, especially if you're selling to a stranger, if you're doing it on Facebook Marketplace or something like that.
Well, it's a good time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have done absolutely no preparation, unless you're Sarah Smith, because she has that question for us.
All right. You guys have all played rock, paper, scissors, right? Okay, so in this game,
Rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. Is that a Big Bang Theory? No.
I don't know.
I don't know. Okay.
You must come up with a fourth item for rock, paper, scissors. What is it? What does it defeat? And what does it lose to?
Well, see what I just said. The rock, paper, scissors, lizard,
That's already
Spock.
made.
No. I know. I'm saying, but that was the. So I actually jumped ahead on your idea. They
You
added
did.
two more things, and I don't remember what lizard did, but Spock. Obviously, I don't know.
Well, there used to be
powerful
like
something.
bomb or something. Or,
Well, yeah,
All right,
it's-
so-
I just in grade school, you do the rock paper scissors stealth bomber. And
I have
What did that
no
look
idea
like?
what that is.
I think it beat everything, but then we just argued. No, you can't.
That's
do that.
annoying. Yeah, you can't have something that beats everything, because then what's the point of the game?
Yeah,
then I'm
they
going
have
to do
to-
stealth bomber every time. But I
What,
came up
do
with
you already
some-
have something in mind?
Well, I came up with something that isn't. I don't know how the heck you would. It's easy when it's rock paper scissors. All I could think about is like someone chewing crunchy chips with their mouth open. That's my fourth thing.
Like it's chomping hand
It
motion.
loses to everything.
Like a Pac-Man.
Because it's the worst sound on the entire planet.
That's like a whole different question that you answered.
I know.
I got
I
one.
don't.
I mean,
It's slug. Rock
Slug.
paper scissors slug.
What
It
is the-
loses to scissors, but it beats paper and rock.
I like it.
Because
That's a good one.
Okay,
It also
with
has
a
the
good answer.
alliteration.
So you can murder the slug with the scissors by slicing it in half. Is that what you're saying? But couldn't the rock smash it?
yeah, I guess.
What if it wants to crawl under the rock and like live its life?
Okay, fine. It loses to rock too. But I mean, if it's a big enough slug, it just like covers the whole thing. It's all slimy.
So gross.
I like that answer. It's got a good alliteration too. I could see my kids really liking
yeah,
it.
okay.
I don't know. Could you do like a wave? Like a wave of water. It defeats paper.
Yeah, because the paper would just wash away.
And would
It
also
rusts
it would
the
also
scissors.
Yeah.
And it washes over the rock.
it
It
Yeah.
erodes
erodes
the
everything.
rock. So it actually, it's kind of all powerful.
Yeah, the way it
Ooh.
rocks.
How do you
Or maybe
find
the-
something that works both ways with these so that it sort of fit into the game, like something that can get defeated by one of the others but still beat? I don't know.
Jazz hands.
Jazz
Jazz hands. Because I was going to actually water was out. And then I thought, well, maybe coffee, but still, what does coffee lose to? It beats everything.
Does beat
Coffee
it. Always
dominates.
wins.
I guess no. You know what? Coffee, because if you dropped a rock in your coffee and it all
Splash.
splashed out,
Right.
no good. But
All right.
I think
what is-
coffee actually loses to paper because it gets soaked up and then the paper's still there, but the coffee's trapped in the paper.
What does coffee do to scissors? You
Ru-
can't.
it rusts.
Scissors
it-
can't.
Coffee
yeah.
rusts scissors.
Okay,
too.
so coffee can win in some circumstances. It
Yeah.
loses in others. Rock, paper, scissors, coffee.
Coffee.
Yes, that's mine. All right. Well, there we go. Okay, so what was your first one?
Someone chewing with their mouth open and crunchy chips. That mouth sound.
I wish right now that I had some Delta 8 chips to anyway. If you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send your emails to fox6investigators@fox.com. Jenna, thanks for being on the podcast as always.
Of course.
Sarah, you as well.
Always.
And thank you to the people who make this podcast possible beyond us three. That includes, well, already our executive producer, Sarah Smith, our editor, Dave Machuda, who, by the way, puts together the best, what do you call them? The outtakes? Because if you haven't seen
Outtakes.
them, the laugh from over here makes it absolutely.
Whoops.
And of course, also our chief photographer manning the video switcher, Hail Zimni. With that, I'm Brian Polson. We'll be back next week.